So this week, the Oscars were forced to make a major change.
Films released only on streaming services and on-demand platforms will compete against those released in theatres for the first time at the 2021 Academy Awards.
Oscars contenders have always been required to play in theaters, so this feels like a big deal for an institution that's usually pretty reluctant to change the way that they do things. Also this week, we saw a major studio get into a public fight with a major theater chain over how movies are going to be released in the future, and this was all sparked by a kids' movie called Trolls World Tour. And this is all, of course, because of the pandemic and the fact that movie theaters are closed around the world. And the rest of the film industry is being hit too. Productions have been put on pause, film festivals have been canceled, and today we're going to get into all of that with Barry Hertz. He's the Globe and Mail's film editor, and we're going to talk about all the changes that are happening, how the industry's adapting, and whether Hollywood can ever go back to normal. I'm Tamara Kandaker, and you're listening to Wait, There's More. Hi, Barry. Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you wrote earlier this week that there's something perversely entertaining about witnessing the collapse of the film industry in real time. It sounds like it's been quite the week for the industry. Tell us a bit about what happened this week.
Well, this week, two huge things kind of happened that are sort of related to each other. The first was that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which administers the Academy Awards, altered its eligibility rules for the 2021 Oscars. Normally, any film that wants to be considered for the Oscars has to play a minimum of a week in a commercial Los Angeles movie theater. So a lot of direct-to-streaming titles or, VOD titles don't qualify because of that, unless they specifically book a Los Angeles theater to do that, which costs a lot of money and is kind of a pain. But because no theaters are open at all, basically, in the world, the Oscars had a choice of whether to cancel or honor like the 2 months worth of films that came out in the year so far, or adjust their rules. So this basically allows that any film can now be considered. It doesn't have to play theatrically. It can be a digital-only release. But they also have to prove to the Academy that they intended to have a theatrical release planned before the world fell apart. So that's the one thing that happened. The second thing that happened is Universal Studios, which released their animated feature Trolls World Tour earlier this month, direct to premium video on demand, charging about $20 per view of it.
Once upon a time, there were two trolls. They saved the world. Pretty cute, right? Not to me. I'm the type of cloud that goes for this sort of thing.
They did that because it was intended as a theatrical release for the spring, but again, no theaters were open. They wanted to get the product out there. They wanted to make money. They wanted to entertain families who were trapped at home. So they did that. And in speaking about the success of that release strategy, Universal's head said, you know what, even when theaters are going to be back in business, I'm going to release movies both theatrically and maybe on VOD as well, direct to video on demand.
The question is, when we come out of this, what is going to be the model? And I would expect that consumers are going to return to the theaters, and we will be a part of that. And I also would expect that PVOD's going to be part of that offering in some way. It's not going to be a replacement, but it's going to be a complementary element, and we're just going to have to see how long that takes.
This infuriated movie theater owners who have a long-standing history with studios, a long-standing kind of gentleman's agreement that, hey, it's going to take about 3 months for a movie to play on the big screen that it takes to get to play to a small screen. If you kind of do that, both of those things simultaneously, you're cannibalizing our business, our theatrical business. Who's going to want to go out if they can get the exact same product at home for, half the frustration and half the time and half the cost? So that led to AMC, which is the world's largest theater operator, basically saying, if you do this, we're not going to let any Universal movies play in our theaters. Then Cineworld, which is another one of the major operators, joined in, and the rest of the big exhibitors are kind of waiting and watching to see how this is going to shake out.
Okay, so that's a lot. So let's start with the Oscars rule change. Studios now can go straight to VOD and their movies would be eligible for the Oscars. So what kind of impact do you think that this could have on how movies are released?
Well, it could have kind of several different ways. If you're a studio and you have, say, a film coming out that was set to come out this fall, or that you were thinking of at least releasing this fall, and you did that because you wanted to kind of get Oscar attention and awards attention, are you going to now, because the rules have been adjusted, instead of holding on to that till whenever theaters might open, are you going to push that out into the marketplace right now? And because the Academy says, hey, you're still eligible for Oscars, don't worry about it. Because even if you push it out now into the digital market, the attention that a theatrical release gets is just kind of unparalleled. It's just not the same, even now that theaters don't exist. So studios are going to have to ask themselves what they want to do with all these movies that they have on their hands. Are they going to want to turn this into any other year minus the theatrical experience? Or are they going to kind of hold on to their wares until the world and the business has turned into something resembling normalcy?
Right. And is it more lucrative for studios to release movies on all platforms at the same time? I know this tension's been going on between studios and theaters for a long time. Can you just explain the conflict there? Just sort of break that down for us.
I think in an ideal world, studios and distributors, they want to maximize the revenue they get on putting out any one product out there. So if you have a big, huge blockbuster, you're going to see a lot more of your audience wanting to see it on a big screen. So it makes sense to see it on a big screen. But if there was some kind of world that operators and distributors could agree on where kind of you can see a movie across whatever platform you want, that would maximize the revenue. And the thing is also, though, the success of Universal's decision to release Trolls directly to audiences at home means they don't have to give movie theaters a cut of the profit of the ticket sales. Typically, that's about 50 to 60% is how much a movie theater would take for the privilege of showing a film in one of their movie houses. So if you cut out that middleman in a sense at least, then you're seeing almost pure profit from the standpoint of a studio. So as much as studios like to pay lip service to the theatrical experience and how great it is for their work to be seen up there, really the bottom line for them is money. And if they can see more money by releasing simultaneously across all platforms, then that's what they're going to want to do.
So you mentioned this controversy with the Trolls World Tour movie. So we're already seeing an example of this tension between studios and theaters here. And just to recap, this movie was supposed to be released theatrically. NBC Universal ended up releasing it digitally. It was a big success. And then NBC's CEO said that from now on, even when theaters reopen, we're going to release movies both in theaters and on VOD. And then you had the CEO of AMC, which is this massive theater chain in the US, responding and saying that this represents nothing but a downside for them and that AMC is going to boycott Universal movies. So how big of a deal is this, and what are we supposed to make of it?
If this actually ends up going through, and there are a lot of ifs in this reality, I mean, we have to consider a world where AMC theaters are first and foremost open for business and playing to the normal capacity crowds that they usually would be, which is a big if at this moment. I don't know when that's going to happen. So if, say, that all happens and AMC does open, are they really going to bar Universal Films from helping them staunch the bleeding that they're currently undergoing? I mean, Universal is the holder of a large number of very successful franchises, including the Jurassic World franchise, the Fast and Furious franchise, and a number of other movies, including under Jason Blum's horror banner, where audiences really prove that they actually go to the theaters to see these kinds of movies. So is AMC not kind of shooting itself in the foot by, taking this stand and thus kind of committing some sort of financial suicide? I mean, that's one kind of view, but the other view is that this is kind of a public negotiation tactic, and AMC is doing some saber rattling here and trying to instill fear in the marketplace in the hopes of maybe striking some sort of compromise with the studios like Universal. Say, okay, we're going to shorten that theatrical window from, it's about traditionally 90 days now, to say 60 days or maybe 30 days in exchange for maybe a larger chunk of that box office revenue.
Right. When NBC Universal says Trolls did really well, what do they mean by that? Like, how how much money did this movie make being released this way?
I believe it's almost approaching $100 million in digital sales. Now, that's not as much as the global box office of the first Trolls movie, but again, we have to take into the consideration that there's no theater owner taking a cut of that percentage. So this is all being directly funneled to them. So that's a really big success. But another caveat is that, well, it was kind of opening in a very vast, empty marketplace. No other movies really were opening around that time because theaters were closed, and no other Universal Studio-like entity has decided to take that direct-to-VOD approach for their kind of theatrically intended offerings.
I mean, I found it kind of surprising personally that people would pay $20 to rent Trolls, and I was just wondering, do you think people would pay that much to watch movies at home moving forward, even with so much other content available on the streaming services that they subscribe to? Do you think a lot of this has to do with the fact that it's the first movie to come out this way and sort of the novelty of that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a novelty factor here. I was very surprised too, because who is the prime audience for this? It's families. And surely families have access to all unimaginable amount of content. This is for people who really, I guess, already cycled through everything that Netflix or Crave or, other streaming services had to offer and decided to shell out $20 for one movie. It sounds like kind of an act of desperation almost. I certainly wouldn't have put myself in that position, but then again, I don't know. But I guess the novelty factor is high. So is this going to happen for a kind of more middling release? I know Warner Brothers is also planning a similar strategy now with their new Scooby-Doo cartoon, Scoob, which is set for a VOD release May 15th. Is that going to be as successful as Trolls? Will the novelty have worn off? Will parents have figured out other ways to entertain their children than spending $20 on a movie that's only available to watch for 48 hours one time? I don't know.
Right. I know the movie The Lovebirds, the one with Kumail Nanjiani and Issa Rae, was supposed to come out in theaters on April 3rd, but now it's been sold to Netflix, and that's also going to come out on May 22nd.
I'm going to give you lovebirds a choice. What's behind this door or bacon grease to the face?
I don't want grease on my face.
Do you know of any other ones where the theatrical releases have been scrapped and they're planning to release them digitally instead?
Yes, and coincidentally or not, they're all comedies. And you've seen kind of big studios kind of inch away from the comedy business in the past few years. So another example is the new Seth Rogen film, American Pickle, which was scheduled for a theatrical release by Sony later this year. That was just sold to Warner Brothers for the debut of their forthcoming streaming service, HBO Max. And they're going to unveil that at the end of May. So you have an example there. And also on the Universal front, to return to them again, they have a new Judd Apatow directed comedy starring Saturday Night Live's Pete Davidson, King of Staten Island. That was scheduled to be theatrically released this summer.
Dude, what is going on with our movie?
King of Staten Island?
Yeah.
I don't think anything. I don't think anyone knows what to do with movies. I don't know. Nothing.
Instead, it's going to be a premium VOD title that's going to be released in June.
Right. So, I mean, I guess, what are your predictions for what this could mean for movie theaters if all these big studios are now making plans to release movies digitally and theatrically at the same time? We don't know what's going to happen in the short term. I guess, do movie theaters survive this?
I think movie theaters will survive this in some fashion, in probably a greatly reduced fashion. I think you'll have, multiplexes that were previously, 12 or 20 screen complexes will probably have half the capacity of that because, first of all, audiences are going to be wary about going into a packed movie theater. They're going to want some sort of distancing. So you're going to have theaters playing to 30, 40% capacity. And where it's really going to hurt is the kind of single theater art houses who kind of rely on more adult-oriented product, and that's just not going to be something that I feel is going to be released and given the theatrical push. So as many theaters are currently operating or are currently, shuttered and waiting to reopen, I just don't see all of those going back to business like normal. It's a very small margin industry, and it's very dependent on a product that changes week to week. So you add something like this into the mix, and it's devastating.
We'll be right back. Let's talk a bit about the film festival circuit. So festivals are being canceled or postponed or going digital.
More than 20 film festivals around the world are teaming up for a 10-day-long streaming event on YouTube. The We Are One Global Film Festival will let people watch movies for free, with cinemas shut down across the globe and major showcases like the Cannes and Tribeca Film Festivals canceled.
And I know Locarno is the latest to go all digital. What does that look like? How does an all digital film festival work exactly?
What I've seen with Locarno and Montreal's Fantasia Fest has also just announced that they're doing this, is they're kind of treating it a festival in everything but kind of the on-site presentation. They're only going to have a set number of screenings. They're only going to allow 200 virtual viewers, or however many virtual viewers would normally fit into a theater, to watch the movie at once, and it's going to be geo-blocked online to that kind of city or festival location. Now, on the surface, this doesn't make a lot of sense because, well, if you're a festival struggling, wouldn't you want as many viewers paying as much money as possible? Yes, you would. But the filmmakers and producers who are showing their work go to festivals precisely because they don't want large exposure. They want to build that word of mouth, or they want to dazzle festival audience so they can get distribution deals or sales. There's a reason they're not going straight to a wide theatrical or wide exposure market.
What about TIFF? Are there any plans for September, and what are they planning to do right now?
When I last spoke with TIFF, they were sticking to their date of September, and they were exploring, in their words, all manner of digital and on-site presentation offerings.
Hi, I'm Cameron Bailey, the Artistic Director and co-head of the Toronto International Film Festival. I and Joanna Vicente, who's the other co-head at TIFF, I've always believed that movies have a unique power to bring people together. And I feel like we need that now more than ever.
September is increasingly seeming like it's tomorrow, and I am very pessimistic that we'll see anything approaching the TIFFs of past with, hundreds of screenings in packed auditoriums across the city. And that's got to be certainly concerning for them because the festival is a huge driver of revenue for that year-long organization.
You also wrote that Cannes has been canceled and that spells disaster for anyone who loves cinema. Why is that? Why this festival in particular?
When you have movies that premiere at Cannes, which is really kind of the premier film festival in the world, and it has been for decades, you kind of seal or attain a instant credibility among the film world, among film goers. Oh, this movie played Cannes. Maybe it's interesting. Maybe I should go see it. So you build, again, that kind of crucial word of mouth and buzz that distributors and studios will use to fuel marketing campaigns and get the films out there in the rest of the year. I mean, a great example is last year's Oscar winner, Parasite, which had its world premiere at Cannes, used the festival acclaim to build awareness, to build conversation, and then turned it into a box office and Academy Awards hit.
And the Oscar goes to Parasite.
If you take a festival like that out of the equation, then you have films that are kind of not sure of what their place in the market is and might sit out the year entirely.
So does that mean that the only offerings we're going to be getting will be from big studios? And I guess, does it kind of diminish the quality of the movies that we're going to be getting?
I think so. I think the fall film offerings, and the fall being kind of the typical time of the year when those really very well made, very adult-oriented, non-blockbuster type of films released, is going to look very weird this year. We're not going to have a lot of them because we just don't have the festival circuit to kind of help boost the awareness of them. We don't have theaters to, again, get the excitement going. So it's going to be really whatever blockbuster content studios are, kind of decide is worth the risk to send out there into the world, and a lot of like VOD content that was always destined for the kind of third tier digital market.
So this is all pretty depressing. Are there any upsides to all of this for us to look forward to?
I'm trying to think of some, and I can't really scratch any right now. I mean, it might help to kind of further erode the kind of little brawl that theaters have going with streaming services, which kind of seems inconsequential and a little dated in the current world and how audiences view content. So that might be something of a silver lining. But really, like, right now, I do take the very cynical and pessimistic approach that this is going to hurt a lot of filmmakers. This is going to hurt the bottom line of a lot of studios who still put out interesting work. And until everybody feels safe really to make a movie, then I'm just going to, sit on my hands nervously.
Right. Okay, well, that's a terrible note to end on. Barry, thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So just one more thing I want to talk about really quickly. I know a lot of us have one question on our minds, which is, are we going to run out of content, and how are movies going to get made? The good news is that the film industry is actively thinking about this. There are proposals floating around that involve quarantining the cast and crew, doing temperature checks, and having some staff work remotely. The bad news is that this will probably only work for some movies, so nothing with huge casts or sound stages or anything like that. We also know that the Directors Guild has tapped Steven Soderbergh to talk to epidemiologists and do a bunch of research and plan a way forward. Soderbergh is a very technically skilled filmmaker who's worked on movies with budgets of all sizes for the big screen, so Barry says he's hopeful about that. And that's all for today. Wait There's More is produced by Rachel Brown and me, Tamara Kandaker. Sound design and mixing is by Stephanie Werner, with help this week from Brent Rose and Rob Johnston. Our editorial assistant is Michael Furtado. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you on Monday.